We are going to be going through a little bit of training for the planners, and this is a great time to ask any questions you may have. And then I'll walk through some specific plans with people so you can see how they work. I'll actually pull open the planners and we'll start working through them. So before we go on, I am going to go ahead and do the slideshow here. So let me go ahead and get that set up. And bear with us, guys. We recently switched over to Zoom from GoToMeeting. And so we're still figuring out some things. I'm still figuring out some things as far as that goes. And one thing that I don't like is that I can't see. Oh, I'm not looking at faces anyways at this point. So Shannon, you still can't see my screen though, can you?
I cannot.
You cannot see my screen. Okay, great. Here we go. There's that. You can see my screen now.
We can see it now.
All right, great. So thanks for joining. We're going to be walking through a few things. I'm going to go through, we're going to do today's special. You can tell my age because remember that show, I think it was on Nickelodeon called Today's Special that had the mannequins and everything. Anyways, in case you weren't there, it was a great show. At least I remember it being a great show. It's probably terrible now if I went back and watched it. But we're going to go through the core concepts that we use with the planner, and we're going to start walking through each planner, starting with the annual momentum planner. So some background here, guys. The planner started out as teaching aids. And that's incredibly important, only because if you're ever wondering why something is there or if it's needed, it's actually come from working with people on their creative momentum and on their planning and on their scheduling. So one thing that sometimes will trip people up is these are actually planning and thinking tools more so than they are brainstorming tools. And so if you're doing a lot of brainstorming, you probably don't want to start with the planners. You probably want to start with a whiteboard, or you want to start with a piece of paper, or you might want to start with some mind mapping. And then once you've done some of that distillation, you can start using the tools. So they're also meant to be your productivity dashboard and not necessarily your to-do list. Now, the big difference is one thing that people will frustrate a lot of people is, they got the 17 gazillion things that they got to do today, and they'll try to get it all on their planner, and it doesn't work. Then they'll write me and be like, hey, man, I can't get all of my tasks on the planner. What's up? Right. And so the thing is it's not really the planners, the momentum planners themselves are not meant to be the place to capture your main to-do list. What I will say is the action item catcher is a good companion if you don't use other tools. If you don't have like an Asana, or if you don't have OmniFocus, or you don't have a to-do list app that you like, the action item catcher is the way to go. It looks very similar. You can print it out wherever you use your planners, or you can use them digitally as well. So if you don't use one already, the action item catcher is more of a to-do list dumping ground than the planners are themselves. So I want to go ahead and slide those things out. Let's talk about core concepts that we use with it. So there's the pyramid of action perspectives. Sounds really heady, but we'll talk about it here. Using your energy to schedule your work, 4 kinds of blocks, constraints and displacement, the 2-hour rule, and the 10-15 split. Lots of things. Just want to remind you, you will get access to this webinar. So you don't have to be scribbling everything down. And the way that I present, I like to give you a lay of the land and then work through each piece. So this is the lay of the land of the concepts. Now we're going to be working through each piece. So the pyramid of action perspectives. I love to use the Russian doll metaphor, but a lot of people haven't seen Russian dolls and know what I'm talking about. But Russian dolls, in case you haven't seen it, are those little dolls where like there's a big doll and there's a little doll inside the big doll. But then when you open up the little doll, there's a little doll inside that doll. And then if you open that up, it keeps going out. So it's dolls within dolls within dolls. Now, the pyramid of action perspectives is kind of like that. We want to start with one big goal. Ooh, let me go back. Turns out if you click, you go that way. One big goal, okay? Part of that big goal are different objectives, different sub-goals, as it were, to achieve that particular goal. Now, why do we call them objectives? Well, it turns out in English, there's no agreed to word for big project. It's very weird. Like we've got a big word for a house, i.e. mansion, but we don't have a big word for projects, even though many of us encounter big projects all the time. I didn't make up the language. I just live in it. like you do. So for objectives, for quarterly objectives and monthly objectives, I want you to be thinking in terms of bigger projects so that you don't end up in the place to where you're putting little projects, little P projects with big objective projects. Then you wonder why like this one project isn't going anywhere and this other one is. Largely what happens is the smaller project gets moving and the bigger one kind of gets punted till tomorrow. So that's why we say objectives, guys, just to get you thinking in terms of big projects. So you've got a quarterly objective, and then a part of that, you have different monthly sub goals to there. You have different milestones, different sub chunks of that project. And then, you know, the month has, you know, different weeks in it and different weekly aspects of those projects. And then those little bitty things, if you're looking at the screen, those are the daily tasks, right? Those are the things that are attached to that. So you can see tasks are part of projects, weekly projects. Weekly projects are part of monthly objectives. Quarterly objectives are part of larger goals. Shannon, I suppose I should have asked, can you see me as well as my screen?
Yes, I can see you.
Great. Okay, so I'm making all these hand gestures, and it's important for the presentation, as you know, to make the hand gestures. Actually, it's important for me to pace myself. So thanks for confirming that. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in. Depending upon your technology, it might be at the top or it might be at the bottom, but there is a place where you can put questions in. And if you have anything that you would like to chat with the group about, when you hit chat in that panel, make sure that it says panelists and attendees, and that way everybody can see it, right? And we much prefer for everybody to see the chat, unless you're wanting to throw Rotten Tomatoes at me. And then I'd much prefer that you send those Rotten Tomatoes to Shannon, so that, I'm joking. No, you can share them with me, and I'll adjust as need to. So if you want to chat with everybody, it's panelists and attendees. If you want to ask a question, you can either do it in chat, which is fine, or you could submit a question and then we'll answer it. Okay. And keep in mind, again, I can't see those questions while I'm presenting. That's the one thing I don't like about the full screen presentation this far. All right, so back on point. Big goals, have quarterly objectives, have monthly objectives, have weekly projects, have daily tasks, and the other way around. Now, the trick is, and you know, I was just, am I going to say this? Yeah, you guys are the first to know. I was actually talking to a developer about the possibility of turning the planners into an app. That's not something you'll see for a little bit, but talking to him about it. But what I was telling him is that one of the challenges that we have with a lot of the tools is that they help us with the task. Like you can drop a huge task list down and get them out, but they don't help you make those tasks coherent and push them into projects and help you overlay those projects in time. And that's really what the planners are trying to help you do. They're a crystallization of the teaching methods around productivity and scheduling and creative momentum that I've been teaching for about 10 years. Okay, so that's the pyramid of action perspectives. Before I go on, because this is an important concept, Shannon, are there any questions or are there any major points that I need to know about for clarification here?
Not so far, Charlie.
All right, great. So second major concept is your energy level is more important than, is a more important thing to consider than your time, because we all have 24 hours in a day, but we don't have 24 hours of really productive time. So, you know, our energy levels fluctuate throughout the day. Some of us are morning people and we're really on fire in the morning. Some are in the afternoon sort of birds. We don't have a good, like we have early birds and we have night owls, but then there's sort of these afternoon folks that we don't have a good word for. So I'm going to call them emus because it's fun, right? And so you might be an afternoon emu, or you could be a night owl. And it just really depends on where you are when you should do your creative heavy lifting. So it sounds super obvious, guys, but do your creative heavy lifting or your focused work when you're creative and able to focus, and do admin when you're not. So don't try to make your work fit your energy. Yeah, hold on. Don't try to make your energy fit your work. That's what I was going to say. Don't try to make your energy fit your work. Make your work fit your energy. So some resources we have on here for this is the productivity heat map, and the post that goes with that, which is how heat mapping your day makes you more productive. The post explains the concept. The tool helps you actually track when you're hot and when you're not, at least creatively. So I really want you to focus on your energy when it comes to getting your best work done. And that leads us to time blocking. So there are 4 kinds of, that shouldn't be creative blocks. There should be 4 kinds of blocks, right? So there are focus blocks. It says creative blocks. So they used to call them creative blocks, but changed terminology here. And you'll see a post on this probably within 2 weeks. I can say that because I just edited the post finally Monday, and it's looking good. So you'll see it within the next couple of weeks on the website. And we'll send out a link to people who have bought the planners, because it's part of the methodology here. So focus blocks, 90-minute to 2-hour chunks of time where you can get something done. Now, this is an important point. Why 90 to 120 minutes, and why not the Pomodoro method? The Pomodoro method, in case you haven't heard of the Pomodoro method, is 25 minutes of working, 5 minutes of break. Well, after years of working with people and trying it myself, what I found is that 25 minutes is not long enough for me to really sink into a deep work or focused project and get some stuff done. Just about the time I'm sinking into it, it's about time for the break. And then because I can be easily distracted, like we all can, that 5-minute break may become a 20-minute break, or it may become a 3-hour break because I'm on Facebook for some strange reason, right? And so focus blocks are 90 minutes to 2 hours, because it's long enough for you to sink in and get something done, but not so long before you start burning yourself out. Now, I've been talking to a lot of people recently who've been saying, Charlie, I really need like 3 to 4 hours in the morning to really dive into a project. Now, that tends to be 2 focus blocks, right? I would want people to think about that, because I do want you to get up and move and shift and go to the bathroom and all those types of things and account for that. But, make it work for you. If a focus block for you is 4 hours long, then carve out that time. And go from there. A social or / service block, if you're in a business or a career where you have to meet with a lot of people, it might be more of a service block, right? Those are 90 minutes to 2 hours. Again, we have sort of this tendency to have hour-long meetings, but there's preparation for the meeting, and then there's the post work that happens from the meeting that are important parts to keep up with. And check yourself if you really think that you can go to, well, not check yourself in a bad way, because we're like, check yourself before you wreck yourself, not going that way, but really check in with yourself to see whether it's true that you can go from meeting every hour and get to the end of the day and actually have processed those meetings and actually have done the work that you need to make them effective. Because I know for me, and know for a lot of my clients, after a meeting or 2 like that, we start losing our ability to keep up. The task debt from the meetings start piling up, and we need to process them. So that's why they're 90 minutes to 2 hours, again, to give you time to do the preparation, to have the meeting, and to do the post work, and also be human. Admin blocks, 30 minutes to 1 hour. Now, I just mentioned Pomodoro. I actually think Pomodoro is great for admin blocks. Now, why are they 30 minutes to an hour? My experience working with people, after about an hour of doing email, like, you start switching and want to do something else. And if it's like an hour of calling the IRS, you can be done for the day. So it's enough time for you to get things done. Now, when you're in an admin block, the whole point is to be processing and doing the work, as opposed to just checking your email and checking so on and so forth. These are the times in which you're actually getting it done. Lastly, recovery blocks. These are variable. And these are the parts in which, the parts of the day in which you actually take care of yourself as a human. So that's the eating, that's the lunch, that's the breaks that you take throughout the day, so on and so forth. I've learned through working with people and teaching folks that we have to put recovery blocks on the schedule and hold them as sacred, because otherwise they don't show up and we're not very healthy for ourselves. We actually are very destructive. So, think about how frequently you, and maybe not you, but other people who do this, who, because they haven't planned for lunch, are like cramming lunch in at the keyboard while they're answering emails, and they're neither enjoying their lunch nor really being effective at the email, but that they don't have that recovery block in there. Pro tip or suggestion, depending upon the way you want to look at it, do the best you can to give yourself a morning routine that starts with recovery, whether that's, exercising or stretching or, making a good breakfast for yourself, meditation, those types of things to start off your day in a really grounded place. So those are the 4 kinds of blocks that you can fit throughout their schedule. We will, as part of the, when we share these materials, we will share 2 new aids that we have. One is the weekly block schedule, and the other is the focus block planner. The weekly block schedule will help you go through there and sort of design your week. Again, that's not so much of a dashboard as much as it's letting you know when these things are best for you. A question that I imagine someone has that I want to go ahead and answer is chores and commutes are most easily put within admin blocks. However, especially if you have a long commute, you might just have another block in the day, right? That's a commute, and that's fine. Again, the idea is like not that you have to follow exactly what I say to the T, but to understand what I like to call the physics of the productivity in your world, meaning the real gravity, the real friction, the real way things work. And we design everything around the way things actually work, which sometimes are not the way we want them to work. Lastly, there's a rough correlation between your energy levels and these blocks. So when you're super hot creatively and focused wise, you want those to be your focus blocks. Your social and service blocks are when you're still like in a good fit for human consumption mode. You're not dragging, you're not really needing to check out. Those are really great times for social blocks. Admin blocks can be when you're lower energy, but you still got a little bit of gumption left. You can do admin blocks then. And then finally, if you're just needing to check out, that's where a recovery block comes in. For instance, I know for me, a lot of times around 4 to 5:30 in the day, I'm actually need a recovery block there, for different reasons. And sometimes earlier if I get up earlier, but I just know that in the afternoon, I'm going to hit a lull. And rather than trying to drink even more caffeine, it's way better if I will actually just take a break for 20 minutes or, step outside or walk around the block or jump in the hot tub or something like that. Okay. All righty. We have a few more, then we'll go. Constraints and displacement. Remember, I just mentioned the physics of productivity. It turns out that there's only so much you're going to be able to do in a day based upon your energy. Now, we can fight, we can flail, we can be frustrated by that. All that's true. And we can also use them to help us make better decisions. So 5 is a natural limit of things that people are going to do at any different level of time. So 5 projects. You might also hear me call these rocks as well. So rocks at each level. So 5 rocks a day, 5 really important things a day, 5 really important things at the week, like a week-sized project, right? 5 really important things a month, like a week-sized project. We call them objectives, right? So we use that over and over again to help you make better decisions. We do ourselves no favors when we continually put 18 things on the to-do list, but we only get 4 things done, right? Because that story of those, I said 18, 4, the story of those 14 things that are left over, it helps us create more self-destructive stories for ourselves, and we don't need that. We already create our own self-destructive stories. And so if you only get 4 major things done a day, it's way, way better, way healthier. It makes you way more productive and effective to use that as a constraint and start deciding what 4 things you will get done, as opposed to what can sometimes be an aspirational list. Like, here's some things that I will get done. Here's some things I might do. Here's some things that would be good to do. Here's some things that, I'm just going to put down there because I don't know where to put them. And that becomes a to-do list. It's super hard to actually be effective with that. So the other thing that I want to say here is you've seen me over and over again say, daily rocks, weekly rocks, monthly rocks. Thinking at the wrong level of perspective creates overwhelm with the planners. Now, what I mean by that is if you have a to-do list that has a bunch of daily rocks, and then you slide on a weekly rock, a weekly size project amongst that list, your brain and you are like, okay, well, which one am I going to do? Like, they're like, which one of these is not like the other? And you have to do a lot of thinking about that. Similarly, if you're thinking about what you need to do today, you may not need to see everything you're going to need to do for the year, right? You just need to have the next steps. Similarly, if you're planning for the month, you don't need to think about everything that's going to happen every day of that month. You can shape the month in using the objectives and using the weekly projects. And that's really the way that it works. And that's what the planners try to help you do, right? If you're looking at the weekly level, you'll see sort of your monthly goals. So you have context. You'll see what your priorities are for this week. And then you'll see at a certain degree of granularity, you'll see what happens on the daily sort of things, right? So that's what they're trying to help you do. And if you look at the monthly, you'll see the quarterly level, you'll see the monthly level, and then you'll see sort of the week so that you're getting just enough information and context to plan. The last thing when it comes to displacement is if you say yes to something, you're saying no to everything else, at least in that chunk of time. So if you can only do 4 things, 4 rocks at that level, and you slide on 1 rock, you've eliminated that spot to do a bunch of other things, okay? So as I've worked with people and as we've been doing this for a long time, what we realize is there's a period of time where we can get super frustrated about constraints and displacement. But once you learn to work with them, they can become some of your best friends because you know that you got 4 rocks to do today, right? That's a default that we placed in your system so that then it's not what all the things am I going to do and what's all possible. It's like, okay, I've got 4 main things I can do today. What are those 4 things? And, you know, at a certain point, you could find peace with knowing that you've done the best that you can do. And, you know, but it can take a while to get there, to be honest. Okay. The 2-hour rule. This very much ties into the focus block thing, but a lot of times when it comes time to our projects, we say things like, if I just had a full day, or I just had like 3 days, I would get so much done. Well, full days for many people tend to be unicorns, right? They like, we want them to exist, but they don't really exist for a lot of us, right? If you can make full days to get your work done, that's fantastic. And I highly encourage you to do those, you know, to go on focus retreats and creative retreats. Great things, do that. But if you're using the myth of the full day to put off getting things done, then I would invite you to, you know, let go of that, right? The other thing about it is, and I've worked with lots of folks, right, on this, left to our own devices, we squander full days. We just do, like we work the same amount that we would on a normal day, and the rest is spent trying to figure out what we're going to do or catching up on sleep, because that's one of the first things I've noticed, by the way, when people do schedule a full day is like, because things aren't going a gazillion miles per hour, they check in with themselves, they realize that they're tired, and they're like, I should really sleep. Or the body's like, you should sleep right now because you can. And then they sleep. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's something that I've seen happen more often than not. So rather than thinking in terms of full days, I'd really encourage people to think in terms of these 2-hour focus blocks as the building block for your projects and days, chunking projects down into 2-hour blocks. Because we know, a lot of us know what we can do in 2 focused hours. And so we can get an idea of like, okay, writing this chapter of this book or writing this section of this book, right, the chunk that we can see, I think that's going to take me 10 focus blocks. All right, where can we find those focus blocks in the schedule? And by the way, the lines on the planners, and we'll talk about this here pretty soon, you can think about those as focus blocks as well. Okay, I'll show you that in a minute. Lastly, I swear this is the last teaching bit before we jump into application or Q&A and then application. Let's talk about the 10-15 split. So creating and maintaining momentum requires monitoring your project, seeing where things go, looking at your daily plans, lifting and shifting as needed. So the 10-15 split is largely spending 10 minutes in the morning to review the plan that you've made but 15 minutes in the afternoon making the plan for the next day, right? This works really well when you do your weekly plan because you don't have to do all the replanning over again. You just have to check to see if it's still relevant and see what's changed. Spend 10 minutes in the morning reviewing it, 15 minutes in the afternoon making the plan for the next day. Why there's more time in the afternoon is that we typically have a better view of where our projects and schedules and work days are at the end of the day than we do in the beginning of the day when we're just waking up, getting our coffee, and fighting whatever distraction is currently in front of us, right? So 15 minutes at the end of the day tends to be a better, you tend to have a better idea, and it's much easier to pick up something, to leave yourself a breadcrumb at the end of the day, to pick up the next day than to start from scratch.